Hey guys, really excited about this episode. We're going to be talking about how to be an influencer when you're changing something at the parish level, right? So we're going to be applying those principles of GLOW. You want to know what those are? Just listen in here. We're going to apply those principles of GLOW that keep you in that zone of influence. This is the best way that you get people on board without them feeling manipulated or without entering that zone of manipulation. But there's... that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So guys, definitely stick around. This is a great one. We'll see you in there. Welcome back.
Hey, we're back. Mega influencers.
What are we talking about today? Oh, this is so fun. Mega influencing.
Mega influencing at the parish level. We're continuing on with just applying these principles of GLOW, or these steps of GLOW.
Yeah.
Finding that common goal and then lessening trigger conditions and optimizing other people's ideal conditions so that you can live in this really like this morally sound influencer role, right? And stay out of that zone of manipulation. When I say morally sound influencer role, it's not just getting other people to do what you want them to do or think or feel the way that you want them to think or feel. But there's also like this openness, this docility that's on your side, this humility that's there to like, where it's just like, okay, like I may not have it all figured out here as well. So like there's a reciprocal willingness, openness to be influenced as well, but also like a conviction here too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, we talk a lot about the distinctions between manipulation, zone of manipulation, and the zone of influence. And I really think the most simple way to say this is like, Jesus was the best influencer. He was not a manipulator. Mm-hmm. He was an influencer. Because really what he always did was he presented an offer, presented a common goal. Hey, like, don't you want to do this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then gave people the free will. It never came from a place of lacking freedom or a place of fear or a place of trying to control. And the reason why we could say this is because God, Jesus, like gave us our own free will. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of loving us so that we can actually love him back with our free will. Yeah, he's not a puppet master.
A painful part of living in the zone of influence is being willing to allow people to walk away. Right? He let the rich young man who he loved, he looked on him lovingly, and he allowed him to walk away. He allowed the people in John 6:66 to walk away after the bread of life discourse. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're staying in that zone of influence. Just know that some people might choose to walk away or choose to say no to what the good that you're presenting them, even if it is a really good, sincere good, right?
And you like, really want it for them.
Something like that. Yeah. They get to walk away. And don't be surprised when you feel sad.
Yes.
Or you feel pain in that. I would argue that's even an ordered emotion. And when we don't recognize that, we can tend to go to the zone of manipulation because it feels a little bit more powerful.
Or we try to get away from that sadness. Yes. And it's like, just enter into that sadness, that sorrow. Mm-hmm. Jesus felt that way too, and enter into it with him. What a beautiful opportunity for prayer in that moment for that person.
So we're focusing on how to apply these influencer skills down to the parish level, and a little quick conversation that we had with Jim Jansen over the Archdiocese of Omaha a couple of months ago, and Michelle Zulke on our team. She's recently one of our newly certified coaches here as well. She'd gone through the coaching program, but Jim and Michelle shared one of the commissions that Archbishop George Lucas, what a name, right? What a name, put out for the entire diocese, and he said, by 2025 or 2026, I think it's somewhere 25, 26, I want every single one of my parishes to be apostolic missionary parishes. And he had given everybody a copy of Father Shea's book, From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, which is all about how we can't just be this cloistered church anymore that thinks that everybody thinks the way that we do, and we're operating in a Christendom environment where everybody knows Jesus and they accept the moral teachings of the church as like that's the baseline.
It's like an ark. It's like, kind of living in the ark and staying in the ark.
Yeah. It's just like, no, we recognize that that's not the status quo anymore. And so just like it wasn't the status quo in the Acts of the Apostles and they needed to be an apostolic missionary church, we're kind of back in that day, right? Where we have to go outside the walls. People aren't being attracted to the church. We have to go out and find those people, go to the fringes. And so I was thinking about this and what would this mean down to the parish level? Well, what this means, like in a very practical way, is that disruptors are going to have to show up at the parishes. Innovators are going to have to show up at the parishes. You can't continue to operate in the same way.
No.
Because right now, the current structures, the current programs that are there, they were set up, arguably, a lot of them set up in this Christendom mindset, right? Where people, it presumes that people are already catechized. They already know the gospel. They accept the kerygma. Where that's not necessarily the case. And so certainly there's catechesis that needs to be involved there, but like innovative ways of going out and meeting people on the highways and the byways that aren't within actually like in the church, coming to mass at that point and getting them in, that's going to take some innovative ways. All right. And innovation always comes with some risk and some disruption and disrupting the current stability and status quo. And for people that have been doing this for a long time, the established leadership, that might be met with some resistance. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say we've both worked in churches before, and we've always been reminded that that we've never done it this way. We've always done it this way. That was always like the statement that kind of blocked anything new.
Yes. Yeah. Constantly Against Veritably Everything. The cave dwellers. Father James Mallon talks about this in his book Divine Renovation. But even with that in mind, there's two ways that these disruptors with the best intentions, these innovators that are going to help really change things down to the parish level to make that shift from Christendom model to an apostolic missionary model. There's two ways that a person can come in and do that. They can come in really as an influencer, right? Where there's honoring the people that have been there before, honoring what their desires are, getting them on board, like helping to craft a new vision that they can all get on board with. That's that first step in G, right? To get a common goal together. But also just like bearing one another's burdens patiently, recognizing that there are some people that really like the way that things are right now.
And like the consistency and so how do you preserve some of those elements that people like and people desire, all while moving into this more apostolic movement outward?
And looking at the individuals that are there too. That's what I love about this process of GLOW is you're looking at the individual persons that you're wanting to influence, and we're going to share ways that you as that innovator can show up in these parishes and really get the individuals on board, right? Or like do what best you can. They always get to choose, but the best way to get people on board. Because the other way is that you can show up as the the manipulator with the best of intentions, and when you do that, like regardless of your intentions, it's going to it's a recipe for trench warfare.
Yeah, it creates a lot of division, a lot of resentment, and really what we're living in right now.
Yeah, you won't get your goal either of the innovative parish.
Yeah, and here's another thing too. So this is like, we're talking about parishes right now, but you guys can, if you don't work in a parish, you can apply what we're going to be sharing with you today to any work environment to really get any colleague or employee on board, or even employer. We talked a little bit about like employee to employer last one.
Yeah, getting a raise.
But fun. Really, it's to get other people on board with a mission, with a new mission.
Yeah.
You can apply this. Okay, so let's go through. We already kind of covered this, but GLOW. Name the goal.
Yeah.
That you can both agree on.
Yep.
And really ask some better questions.
Yeah, we'll be getting into some better questions to ask based on the temperament of the person you're seeking to influence. You always want to take unique design into consideration here so we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to influencing.
And then we want to lessen their trigger conditions, knowing their temperament. Now, obviously, this implies that people know their temperaments. We do have a free temperament assessment that you can share with your team that might help with this process.
This is super helpful. And I recently got to do this at a parish level, and we have a lot of people that are trained to be able to deliver this workshop or temperaments workshop down at the parish level. And so it's very helpful when you can know the individual temperaments of the people on your team, because you know how to react. You have a deeper understanding of why they do the things that they do and what motivates and drives them. And so you, rather than working against that, you can start to work with that a little bit more. It's a very respectful way of interacting.
Yeah. And then finally, optimizing their ideal conditions.
Cool.
So we have coming up with a collective goal, lessen their trigger conditions, and then optimize their ideal conditions. Okay.
Yeah. Trigger conditions, just so you guys know, like it causes people to close down, right? It often evokes some sort of a fear response.
Or aversion.
And then they desire to control whatever they're feeling is out of their control, right? So they close off. And remember, we always go back to the image of influencing, meaning to inflow, right? Pour into. That's where it comes from. So the pitcher that is pouring into the glass, that glass can't have a lid on it, or can't have somebody's hand over the top of it. It needs to be open to receiving the good that you want to give to it, right? If somebody's not open, if they're triggered at that point, then before we start to try to influence, that step one is seeing that they're open to it. But if we try to pour into that person when they're not open to it, it's going to come off as manipulative, because it is, right?
Yes.
And they're going to experience that as a violation to their dignity. And that is not going to lead to the apostolic missionary churches that we are going for.
Amen.
Cool.
Let's do this.
Let's do it. Okay. So we're going to start applying what we're going to do here. The structure of this podcast follow similar to some of the structures that we've had in the previous episodes, but we're going to be applying these principles of GLOW on how you might approach somebody of a choleric, a sanguine, a melancholic, or a phlegmatic temperament, and trying to get them on board with something new that you're trying to do at the parish level.
All right, let's do it. Let's do the choleric.
I love it. All right. So one of the things I love you brought up, Aaron, is getting that common goal isn't so much of saying, hey, how about this?
Yeah, it's asking a question.
It's asking a question, right?
Yeah.
And asking a question and framing the question in ways that tap into their
desire,
their natural motivations that we can understand from their God-given temperament.
Yeah.
Right? Temperaments are motivated differently.
Yeah. So a question that you could ask a choleric, because clerics love efficiency. They love kind of like making intangible things tangible,
love
progress.
Yes.
They like achievement, all that stuff. And you could word a question as, how do we make a bigger impact and do it quicker and more efficiently?
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, so let's go out there. Now, I don't think you're going to have to like really twist a cleric's arm to go out there and be apostolic. They like going out there, right?
Depending. For the most part, I think clerics, they love running with the ball.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, they love having the tangible result in their hand.
Yeah. Or like, right, how do we make this idea tangible would be a great question to ask a cleric and bring them in to the same goal.
Yeah. So right? I picture all the parishes here that are sitting down in the Archdiocese of Omaha, and they've got their parish leadership team, and they're like, okay, we've got this commission from our Archbishop. How are we going to move forward with this? This might be one of the first questions that you ask. Now, you may not have a team full of clerics sitting at the table. We'll give you a couple other ways that you can ask these questions, considering all the different temperaments that are at the table here. But picture, I think it's helpful to just picture, this is where we're starting the conversation. You want to start it at getting a common goal, because trust me, if you don't start there, you're going to send people out to do their work, and this person's going to go this way, this person's going to go that way, and they're all going to be pursuing this ideal that they have in their head.
Yeah.
But until it's a shared ideal, a shared vision, you're not going to have alignment and people working together.
Yeah, I think back to this one time where you and I had just joined our parish council. This was back in New York. And I think you may have been the only choleric on the team at that point, or in that actual meeting, because it was just lots of ideas, lots of problems brought up, and then nothing was made tangible.
Yeah. So now we are going to do this.
Right.
This is what we're going to do to solve
And
that.
I remember, like, it was just like, okay. And it was like moving on to all the problems that kept coming up. And Matt goes, wait, hold on. What are we doing to actually solve these things? And it's what is even the point of us being here? Is because we know that all these problems exist. Like, that's not what this is for. This is for to actually come up with solutions. I imagine as a parish council.
And it feels good. Like, and this is something where, again, some of those temperaments, especially the melancholic temperament that has they have a very deep cognitive life, and the way that they think through things. Thinking things and talking about things can feel very active. It can feel like you are actually taking action. And like, what is that translating into something that we can actually see and hold and touch? Like, that's where the choleric can really come forward. And that's what really is driving the choleric, to make what is invisible visible. I think melancholics, we'll get into that in a second, but they're very driven to be conceptualizing things and understanding.
Another
choleric
great
wants
question
to make it tangible.
Another great question to ask a cleric is, how do we execute on this?
Yes.
And they would be like, boom, 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 and then they would start doing it. So it's amazing. These questions are really helpful. Okay, so what is a trigger condition for the choleric in doing something new, going out there and doing something new?
Yes. Okay, so how do we lessen the trigger conditions for the choleric? Okay, so when you're doing something new, I would be, and you're inviting a cleric to do something new, I'd be aware that clerics don't like to look stupid, right? They don't like to feel incapable. They don't like to feel powerless. They don't like to feel set up for failure.
Okay.
All right? And so that's something that can kind of cause them to go to this place of fear. It's like, okay, you're putting all this on me, but you're not really giving me all the things that I need to be able to get it done, or it's too much work that you're giving to me. So I think it's one way that you can lessen this trigger condition is just holding the space for that a little bit, and just knowing that, hey, like, it's normal to feel a little nervous about doing something new, right? But also it's just like reminding them that how capable they are at the task. And we'll get kind of move very, very seamlessly into creating those ideal conditions. I think
can I add one more trigger? One more trigger that I think clerics struggle with is having undefined measurements.
Oh, sure.
And
there's no definition of what winning looks like.
Right. And so, like, a way to lessen that trigger would be to say, like, here are our measurements, and here's when I'm going to check in, and here's what I will be looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, because the cleric really doesn't want to stay in that abstract land. They want to be in that place of getting those tangible results. I think it's really good to be able to give to the cleric a clear picture, like a SMART goal kind of goal for people, that has something where you can look at it and measure it, and you know when you've arrived, and you know when you've won. Is being made. Right? Yeah, exactly. There's tangible progress, and you can actually hold it in your hand. Okay, so that's something to be aware of on the lessening the trigger side of things. Okay.
Great. Yeah. And so really, choleric's ideal conditions would be whatever would be countering those trigger conditions.
Yeah, the clear success measurements, you already talked about that. Giving them as much ownership of the process as possible, right? So clerics like to take and run with the things and own. Yes, that's an important thing. And so if you could give them as much that they can do on their own, right? So that they're not necessarily waiting constantly on somebody else to kind of move forward with them. I think that's a way that you'll find that a cleric can take something and run with it and get things done a little bit faster. But also, like, one of the shadow sides of the cleric is they can often be a one-man show or one-woman show. And reminding them of the necessity of the team and using the team well. I think one way of doing this is just asking the question of, like, hey, what support do you need?
Yeah.
Like, I know you can take this and you can run with it, but I want to make sure that we're not burning you out here as well. So what is some support that you could see yourself needing, and maybe putting that person in charge of a team of people?
Yeah. And, like, what are the gaps? Because I think even just asking that question, what are the gaps? It will help them start to build those clear success measurements even within their own mind and in a team framework.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, here's the gap. I'm really not good at doing, I don't know, like, online design. But like here's somebody on the team who I know is actually really good at that. And so
Yeah.
part of my success measurement will be like, when I need something like this, I'm passing it off to them. It's a process now.
Yes.
See, so it's kind of starting to, even asking them areas of support and be like, so we can fill your gaps.
Yeah. Helping them to really define the who. That's going to help them bring something to completion and the people they can lean on. I know for me as a cleric, knowing that I can depend on the different members of my team to like do certain things. I mean, there's some people on our team that I can't depend on to do things like proofreading, right? But I know that that's just not their gift. That's not their skill set. And so,
but you can depend on
but
them
I know
for
there's
other
somebody
things.
else that I can depend on to do some proofreading, right? So things like that, you start to learn what you can depend on people to do and what you can't really depend on them to do. And it's not a knock on them. It's just like,
it's just not part of their unique design.
yeah, we need one another,
Yeah.
right? We need to lean on one another, and it's okay, cool. That's why we explore weaknesses when we do our temperaments workshop, and we show up when you come to parishes and we do these leadership workshops that explore temperaments. We look at weaknesses because weaknesses are opportunities to partner.
Yeah.
Right?
Strategic partnership opportunities.
Be the body of Christ. Okay.
All right. Sanguine.
Sanguine. All right. So we're trying to influence a sanguine to get on board with some changes at the parish level. Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, let's paint this picture a little bit. Sanguines are the easiest to get on board to do something different, new, some type of variety. That is part of what
I concur.
That is part of what they love to be in, is this movement and variety. So it's not going to take a ton of effort, but I do think getting a sanguine to do something how you've always done it, or actually, I guess, commit to a process that's already been created, I think that's worth looking into here. And that's really what I would like to
Tell me a little bit more about that, because you clarify for me, because I heard you say they love doing things in innovative ways.
Yeah.
But you said give them a process and
a
way of doing it the way it's always been done. That seems like the opposite.
Right. No, it is. It
Okay.
is. What I'm saying is, I think an area where, it would be kind of a waste of time for us to say, how do we get a sanguine to do something new? It's that's it, what they love to do. Mm-hmm. So we don't even need to influence them. But we're going to take a different nuance on this.
How do we channel them?
How do we actually, get their excitement and enthusiasm to actually commit to maybe a process that already is working, that just needs to be applied to this goal? Does that make sense?
It does, but can you also get that same energy and excitement to start campaigning and galvanizing for something that is new, right? That's new. That isn't a current process.
We could do both, but I'm just thinking the triggers here is just okay, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, and this is something too, you may not have a sanguine on your team, especially if your parish has been one that has done things the way that they've always done them. That's you may have a lot of phlegmatics and melancholics that are on your team, and maybe some clerics, but that's not necessarily a thriving environment for a sanguine. So you may be looking at your team and be like, you know what, we could really use somebody that has that type of activator, innovative, excitement, positivity kind of energy that we want to bring in here, and we want to invite them to actually be a part of the team. And that doesn't just go for the sanguine temperament. That goes for all of the temperaments. There's value that's here. But some of them, when you're going innovative and you're going new and you need to get people on board, that is your sanguine.
Yep.
Really, that does that work.
Right. Okay. So name the goal. So you're trying to get them on board to doing this new thing. Go ahead.
No, a question could be how can we make this fun? Right.
How can we play? How can we innovate here? What can we create? What's a fun solution for this? And also, how can you do this together in a group? How can you inspire others into this?
Ooh, I like that.
I think that is actually where you want to channel, really where you want the sanguine to be living, is inspiring others into this goal. Right? Like I said, they're not hard to buy into doing something new, but maybe their job is to go get others and get excited about this.
Yes.
And they're happy to do that.
Yes, I'm even starting to see here, like all of these questions kind of have to do with creating a collective vision for the team. And your different temperaments are going to bring, different considerations to the table. And because they value things on a different level. Like the sanguine's going to value the collaboration arguably more than the cleric. The cleric's going to value perhaps getting it done and the achievement and hitting deadlines a little bit more. And so the vision there might be a little bit more structured. It might be a little bit more active. And the sanguine might be kind of thinking outside of that. It's like, let's get more people on board. Let's get everybody excited about this, maintain the motivation.
Yes, that's definitely a thing.
What is that environment? How does that contribute to the collective vision?
My goodness. I don't know. Okay. So a trigger for sanguine.
Triggers. Yep.
I would say like a trigger for a sanguine is like, this is so exciting to feel like if I were a sanguine on a team, I'm just putting myself in this shoes. And it's like, Aaron, your only job is to take all of this excitement that you have and go tell people about it and like bring them in and inspire them to join this. I'd be like, done. That's the easiest thing for me to do. But a trigger that might get in the way of that is to maybe feel like that isn't a gift. Like that ability, that desire to be with people, that desire to get people excited, that desire to get people to hope isn't really a gift. It's kind of like not acknowledging, like a trigger is when other people don't really acknowledge that your desire and your ability to go out and inspire people is a gift.
Okay. So acknowledging if you're trying to inspire the sanguine to get on board with a new vision, right?
And actually go and spread that vision?
Yes.
Yeah.
They hate being misjudged. They hate people looking at them and being presumptive.
Or not valuing them.
Not valuing them.
Not seeing their place in this whole thing.
Okay.
Like, okay, I can relate to this because it's like, I'm at a lot of technical meetings where it's like all execution. And I'm like, that's great. But if it's just like, hey, Aaron, the way that you can execute on this is go tell people about it and go like do that, like go get people inspired. Go do it your way.
It's even that galvanizing, right?
Yes.
Where's galvanizing for you?
It's one of my
working geniuses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like that's got it. Okay. So, but the trigger that causes you to shut down and to operate from a place of fear is like this. I might be misunderstood.
It's your gifts aren't needed here.
Okay.
Like that's kind of trivial. Your gifts, like they're not needed here right now.
I'm wondering even like this whole, because you've brought this up before. This sanguine thinking like, oh, I'm just too much, right? Or I'm
not enough.
Too much excitement, or
and
not,
in this case, it's
enough.
like I'm not enough. I don't have I'm not very executed. Like I don't really execute on things. I'm not really getting things done or finishing things. But I know I can go talk to people and get them like excited and intrigued in something. Okay. I do know that.
Okay.
And so for somebody to like, I think a way to lessen this trigger, like this trigger being like, you don't have a place on the team. That's really what the trigger is. Or feeling misjudged, but disconnected from the team.
Okay.
Like a way to lessen that would be like, no, your place is right here. Is going and telling people. Okay. Is receiving the message and going and telling people about it. That's your place. Okay.
Yeah. And it may not necessarily be like the super active kind of place, or like it may seem that a cleric dominated environment or something like that. But just you can lessen those trigger conditions by acknowledging the gifts that they do have.
Yeah, and
just
saying
seeing
like
those gifts and be like, hey, they're necessary.
This is how you get things done.
Okay, giving them permission.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. It's like giving you permission to influence others and to be like, this is how you actually execute things. You do it in a different way. Yep. But this is how you get things done.
Okay. So if we move on to optimizing the ideal conditions for them, what are some things that we can do for sanguine? Because remember, we optimize ideal conditions. That's when they're going to be most open to being influenced.
Give them ways to be in front of people. Like give them a stage, maybe not a stage, but give them like a platform to actually speak about this message, about this new goal, about the vision. Maybe they don't even come up with the vision. Maybe somebody else comes up with the vision. But they're the
like,
ones
I love it. Let's do it.
who are getting everyone excited. So give them that.
I think I'm already on our team.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I know. It's like, give them these
Yes,
ways,
goes.
these ways to connect with people and get people excited.
Yeah.
Just remove any barriers to that. Like, you do this, you go talk to 50 people about this thing, and they're like, done,
Yeah. So like the sanguine, so you're saying the sanguine might not be the person that's at the planning meeting that is like making all of as much of a contribution at that level. But once we get something that is relatively baked,
done,
and the vision is clear, they're your ones that are going to go to all the highways and byways.
They
and
spread
tell
the
good
message.
News. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So pairing up with somebody else here as well, I think is important for the sanguine.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
They enjoy collaboration, and so don't make them work in isolation.
Oh yeah, big time.
Okay. What else?
Yeah, just like have consistent check-ins with them. Like, sometimes they forget. So like, you would just be like, hey, how many people have you talked to about this? Right.
Yeah.
Or here's another thing you could do is be like, how would you like to receive this message? Because if they're not going around sharing something, it's because they don't believe in it yet.
Okay.
And so it's like, tell me why you think this is awesome, and just kind of get their brains going. And then when they have that connection of that belief, now you don't have to do anything.
I'm wondering if that's your phlegmatic influencing here, because I hear with that is like conviction, and I know that phlegmatic personality type is very conviction driven, right?
So
building belief.
So is sanguine.
Okay.
Yeah, because like sanguine, the conviction keeps them going.
Okay.
So they kind of need it, but it's very accessible to them.
Yeah,
conviction
keep the conviction, but keep the novelty of it as well,
Yep.
right? And so there might be changing the ways that you go out and spread the good news to everybody. I think that's important. Because
you could ask that question, like, how do you make this more of a creative message? Like, how would you create this message? You don't have to do it exactly how we do. The greatest freedom is when somebody gives me a script and they go read through it, pick out the points you like, and then throw it out.
Love it.
And then get the point across to somebody.
Yep. Cool. Awesome.
Let's go to melancholic.
Yep, let's do it. Okay. So melancholics, very idealistic people, and so they've got high ideals. And so if we're going to be asking them a question, we're sitting around that board table again, or sitting in a fun collaborative space.
I just want to keep an eye on time too.
Eye on time.
You
Got
have
it.
an appointment.
Thank you, Mama. Okay. So how do we jumpstart them to start to create this vision? Melancholics, very strong interior life. They can really conceptualize. They can really visualize very well. And so how do we jumpstart that? I think a great question is just like what does an ideal image of success look like here? Like if you could paint any picture of success, what does an apostolic parish look like for our parish? Not for anybody's parish, but like for our parish here, what does that look like? I think a melancholic would spend days and hours and weeks and months pondering that.
I think that's part of it. And I also think a great question to ask a melancholic, once you have that ideal, is say, okay, now tell me all the problems that you see in the way.
Give them space to kind of like see all the things that are like,
and then be like, and then what we're going to do is find solutions to solve each one of those problems. That's like allowing them to live in that place of finding those problems. Like just being like, we're going to give you space to do that, but we will come up with strategies.
Yes, and I think that's important. That moves on kind of like lessening the trigger conditions. One of those trigger conditions for the melancholic is because they can be prone, is kind of a weakness, they can be prone to ruminations. When there's a lot of negativity that's going on, they can really focus on that negativity, and they can kind of go into a spin cycle. And so one of the ways that you can lessen that trigger condition of dealing with problems, right? Yes, they're not as triggered as sanguines are at the sight of a problem, because they see them as something, okay, let's just ponder this. And there's even a delight in pondering and coming up with a solution. But you can make sure that they write that problem down, and then we address one thing at a time. Okay, so that kind of moves into the ideal conditions of just the melancholic, very strong. And what can happen is they can start to solve one problem, and then another thing pops up, and they don't solve that first problem, but they go on to the next problem. And next thing you know, they're just overwhelmed, and the anxiety is peaking. So we can just say, hey, you know what? Let's just focus on one at a time
and come up with strategy.
And they're really good at being able to find all of those landmines out there that perhaps the sanguine and their positivity, or the choleric and their go kind of attitude, they don't necessarily see those things.
I think another thing too, which would kind of couple with this question, and then like all those triggers and ideal conditions for the melancholic is the question, what can we learn from this? How can we learn? How can we experiment with this and find, and how do we understand this? This is really speaking to that desire to understand, to know.
Yes.
For the melancholic. And so those questions could be like, okay, so like once you kind of, what are all the landmines, the problems that are in the way? And then how can we learn like the solutions to these things together? Like how can we start to learn these solutions together? And so that is because here's what will happen is they start piling up all those problems, and they have this ideal in mind, and now they're going, oh, the grass that's always greener on the other side, that ideal, now that fence is like
really high,
really like 50 feet high. Yeah. Like I can't even see it anymore, right?
Yeah.
So there's that overwhelm.
Yep.
And then they're afraid that they're going to be doing it wrong, which is like a trigger for them. Like, I'm not going to do it perfect the first time. I'm going to do it wrong.
And so they want to avoid the failure.
Yeah.
And so they don't even show up.
Right.
Like,
right.
So I love what you've done here with this. And this is kind of a way of, so one of those trigger conditions is that I failure. I failed, right?
Yes.
This fear of failure that's there, a perception of failure. And what you've done is you said, okay, if we can reframe this as like learning, which is something that really is motivating for the melancholic, or a lesson or an experiment.
Yep.
That I know has been something that's huge for me. Is it's like, hey, let's just like look at this as an experiment. And what happens there, if it's an experiment, there really is no failure in an experiment. There's just learning that happens through an experiment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always kind of those step-by-step, like let's take a step back, reflect, and then what did we learn? Take a step back, reflect, like try something new. And I love that process for a melancholic. Try something new. There's nothing permanent about this. There's no grade on this. There's no like, big F, on your paper on this. It's just try this, take a step back, learn. Try this, take a step back, learn. Right. Yeah. And so it's it's incremental movements here.
Right. So as we move on to those optimizing the ideal conditions here for the melancholic, what are some things?
I think, like exactly what I was just saying, kind of break it down into those really simple steps and just being like, we're just experimenting. There's no right or wrong. There's nothing permanent. No decision is permanent here, but we're going to see what works. We're going to pause, take a step back. It's really just breaking down this process for them. Yeah. And then what did we learn from this? I think that's a really tangible process there.
And I love something that you wrote here as well, like creating a space for the melancholic to ask questions. They're going to have a lot of questions, right? Because their mind is in there, and they're asking these questions. And if you don't create that space, they'll just move on to another question, and they'll never consciously answer the question that's in their head. Unconsciously, they'll answer it with the worst possible case scenario. Right? So just know that. Create that space to kind of get the clarity. They're seeking clarity. And just notice, especially if you're like a cleric and you just want to get done and move on, that like this might be a place for you as a cleric that's really good at creating space and filling space to kind of step back, right? And create space for other people. It doesn't mean that the good idea box is always open and the question box is always open and we never actually execute. But there is a space, and I like to be able to even structure some of our meetings where it's just like, okay, right now this is there really is a lot of room for considerations and questions, and we're writing with pencil, not carving in stone.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I also think helping them create an ideal work environment too was really helpful. Like quiet, alone for a little bit. They're introverted, and so they do need quiet reflection time. Yep. Don't expect them to be working in a busy, like fast-paced, loud environment. Give them like, I don't know, the office at the bottom of the stairs in the basement.
Yeah, and
where they can like be quiet.
Well, don't expect it's like we're going to have one planning meeting for this, and then everything is going to be like like in stone after that one planning meeting. No, because the melancholic is going to be pondering, and you'll come back a week later, and their brain is still working, and so maybe there's a month that's going to be dedicated to what our plan is to make this an apostolic parish. Right? Maybe you're going to want to collect a lot of information here as well. Okay, let's move on to phlegmatic.
All right, phlegmatic. How can we, this is a good question to ask them because they love ease and they like processes and things that can just be repeatable.
Stability.
Because there's something that's certain about that and consistent about that and creates balance for them, and they love all those things. So a couple questions you could be like, how can we create a process that maximizes participation and minimizes disruption? Right? How can we make this process easier for people? How can we make it more consistent and more balanced? These are all really good questions to kind of bring that phlegmatic into the conversation and leave space for them to answer.
Yes, I think the phlegmatics have a real great contribution that they could to bring to the table here for this movement from a Christendom model parish to an apostolic missionary model parish, right? Because they're slow to throw out the old, right? They recognize the what's already there,
what has worked.
They can see the value in it. Whereas like maybe the sanguine of the cleric might be like, yeah, it's all, it's like toss it and we'll just try something, we'll shake it up, and all of a sudden we've disrupted the apple cart significantly, and we've created a lot of trigger conditions for our parishioners and for people on the team.
And for phlegmatics.
For other phlegmatics, right? So that I love that question. It's like considering, how do we do this in a way that is harmonious? How do we do this in a way that maximizes the participation and considering the people
and also,
that have been in the parish for years?
Gallup was talking about, the 4 things that actually create a good leader, and consistency was one of them. Like trust, consistency, hope, and I forget what the other one is, but consistency was one of them, where it was just like, how do we remain consistent? Because people will trust you more when there is some level of consistency. Yeah.
So even like, how can we, as we're rolling out changes, how can we make little micro promises to people that are easy for us to fulfill? Okay. And a micro promise could be something like, hey, when at the back of the church, we're going to have a Q&A or a little question box. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to publish the responses that we make to each one of your questions, right? That's like an example of a small micro promise that lets people know that like, okay, I'm part of this. This isn't being something that like the people up in the ivory tower are dictating where we're going here.
Okay, so let's go to the lessening the trigger conditions here.
Cool.
A trigger for a phlegmatic and doing something new is actually doing something new. They're afraid to try new things because they kind of don't trust like the unknown. Like it's like, oh, this is like opposite of certainty, and how do I know this is going to work? And so like a lot of times they'll stay in that stagnant place. I like exactly what you just suggested, like those micro changes. One thing that I'm secondary phlegmatic, and I used to work for a phlegmatic priest. And instead of saying, we're going to change things, I would say, what could we introduce that's small that might give us a different result? So it's very like, it's very formulaic. It's like, what's a small thing that we could introduce, a small piece of the puzzle that we could introduce right now, and then we can measure it and see if the result is different. Yeah. It's so like more inviting. It's not like we're not changing anything. Like everything's exactly the same, but we're just introducing one new thing.
Cool.
So I think that is actually a way of lessening the trigger conditions for the phlegmatic. I think it's very rational. I think it's reasonable. I think they could get behind it.
Yeah. Even the way that you would present that, I remember Aaron, you'd be like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, and we have permission to kind of back away from this.
Right.
If this isn't
permission to never do it again.
Yep, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember saying that to him too, and being like, and then if it's terrible, we'll never do it again. And I promise you that.
That's how we got praise and worship. Yep. Eucharistic adoration, praise and worship introduced at the parish, and that's even how we got the Chris Kindle market jump started there.
It was how we presented everything to him. Like that was just like, we're just going to try this. And if it's terrible, we'll never do it again.
What a great priest.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So a phlegmatic ideal condition is, those incremental changes, a process and systems to anchor them. So it's like, how can we create a process in this? If you're bringing them into that exchange, that's super helpful. Having a balanced and structured environment with clear boundaries. I think having like a phlegmatic, like the melancholic, but they have a place to go back to that's quiet and that's balanced, that's neat and not like messy. I know these are more external environments, but that is actually helping them create an ideal condition.
Even just moving a little bit slower, right?
Yep.
And I mean, the church has a way
a little more cautious.
It's almost like the church as a body is just phlegmatic. It's slow to change things, but they're also very, very intentional about preserving what is good, right? Which is neat and necessary, right? But just having just an awareness that we may not be introducing too many things all at once.
Yes.
New things.
Oh, this is my secondary phlegmatic. We're doing a lot of changes in our business behind the scenes. And my phlegmatic is majorly triggered by this. And I'm
just like, let's go.
Why are we doing all these? I mean, I'm primary sanguine, so I like new things, but I'm like, we don't even know if this is going to work. And like, we're changing too many things. We can't measure them. It's like super triggering for me. So like to kind of do these things a little slower, but also just like more intentionally. Like, how can we measure this change? How do we know that this is the real problem? How do we know if we're fixing it? Let the phlegmatics ask those questions because that is going to really, they can start to measure these things. And you're going to want them on your team to ask those questions, even if they're asking them in their mind. So another ideal condition is give them room to speak. Actually ask them, what are you thinking about right now? Because they won't kind of come in and say like, yeah, I don't like that. They won't really be the ones huge. To say that.
Yep. It's like recognize that when you're sitting around the table and the phlegmatics are there, you literally have to create a space for them to be like, okay, Georgiana, like what is going on over here? Or like Flo, picking some names that are just Philomena. What are you doing over here? Barb, what's going on?
Yeah, right.
Like make your contribution. That's a great ideal condition there for the phlegmatic.
And then also encourage them and surround them with people who like to collaborate. Once they have their mind made up, they're very assiduous. They will finish tasks. They're great collaborators with people who are not finishers, which are sanguines. And so like surround them with other people who are encouraging too, who actually see, hey, this is what you give to the table, and they tell them that. And like, I love how you just maximize that and also made it so much easier. Like, thank you, phlegmatic person,
Yeah. I'm always impressed when you work the word assiduous into a sentence.
Yes.
Just like the first thought that goes on in my mind is, I think I know what that means, but not really.
Yeah, it's consistent, hardworking. Like it's.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
I mean, fact check me on it, but
I knew that.
Pretty sure I looked it up and found out what it meant.
Well, cool. Hey, that's what we got here today. Okay, so if we just do a quick recap, we're thinking.
You have an appointment, like in 2 minutes.
Yeah, we're good. Do a quick
recap.
Quick recap on these things is just know that if you want to stay in that zone of influence, if you want to roll out some changes at your parish, you want to stay in that zone of influence that honors other people and their dignity, their ability to say no, but also leaves you open to being influenced yourselves. Right? It's a two-way street here. So following that process of glow, getting to the goal, the common goal that you can all agree on. That's step one. Step two is lessening those trigger conditions, and then step three is optimizing those ideal conditions. If you find that you're having a very difficult time getting to that common goal, right? Just move on to step two and step three, right? That can open people to even enter the conversation.
Totally.
Of finding a common goal, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. We're going to be starting on how to optimize your resources
as a leader. Yeah.
As a leader. And we're not going to really be talking so much about time, money, even though those are resources. We're going to be talking about the resource that nobody talks about. And that is your emotional life.
And your mind.
How do we optimize these resources? Because you need to know how to optimize these resources first before you do anything else.
Cool.
And so we're going to be talking about that through the lens of your temperament, your emotions, and your mindsets around optimizing your resources.
Great.
Yay. We'll see you then.
See you guys. Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.